Men barely understand their own minds, and yet, somehow, they walk around thinking they understand women. That wasn't a direct quote from Plato, but if you look closely at his work with a sharp, honest eye, you'll feel that message woven into everything he taught. Plato didn't hand out dating advice. He didn't tell men how to get the girl. That wasn't his concern. What he was actually trying to do was much deeper. He focused on the inner blindness that keeps a man from seeing the forces that truly control him. Way before men learned to chase beauty, before they bowed to the soft pull of a woman's voice or the curve of her smile, Plato had already diagnosed the core issue: the untrained mind. Because when your mind is not trained, not disciplined, not ruled by reason, it becomes the perfect playground for illusion, manipulation, and self-deception. You've probably heard of the allegory of the cave from Plato's Republic. It's the story of prisoners, locked in a dark cave, chained and forced to stare at a wall. On that wall, they see shadows, mere reflections of real objects behind them. But to the prisoners, the shadows are reality. They believe the illusion. They live and die for it. Most people think this is just about politics or society, but that's only the surface. What Plato doesn't say outright, but heavily implies, is that one of the most powerful shadows on the cave wall is the image of woman. Not the actual woman, not her real complex nature, but the idea of woman, the projection, the fantasy, the illusion. This false image has been cast in the minds of men for generations. It's intoxicating, and it works perfectly, because most men never realize they're even trapped by it. Let's break it down. Plato warned that people will always fight to protect their illusions. They'll reject the truth when it's shown to them because the truth hurts. It burns, and no illusion is more protected, more romanticized, more defended than the belief that women are pure, innocent, and incapable of manipulation. This is the grand theater where most men lose themselves. She smiles. You call it love. She cries. You call it sincerity. She touches your hand, and suddenly, it's fate, destiny, meaning. But Plato would laugh, because this is exactly the behavior of a man still chained in the cave, too afraid to turn his head and face the light. Plato said, "True wisdom begins when you realize you know nothing." He said, "The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms." But how many men ever stop to define what a woman is, not by what she shows them, but by what she truly represents in their psychological and spiritual life? How many men study the influence of femininity with the same discipline they apply to business, politics, or philosophy? Almost none. And that's why women have such quiet, effortless power over the emotional world of men. She doesn't have to manipulate you on purpose. She doesn't need some grand plan. She simply is. Her presence is enough to expose the blind spots in your soul. She reflects your ignorance back to you, and you call it love. Plato said, the worst kind of deception is self-deception, and nowhere is this more visible than in the way men fall in love. They tell themselves they're being rational. They think their feelings are pure. But in reality, they're reacting to shadows, ghosts, internal fantasies that have nothing to do with her real nature. And here's the kicker. She isn't even doing anything wrong. She's not the manipulator. Your illusions about her are. You've built a temple in your mind where you worship an idea of her. You gave it a crown. You handed it control. And then you wonder why you feel powerless when she walks away. Let's go deeper. Plato described the human soul as a chariot being pulled by two horses. One noble, the other wild. The noble horse wants truth, discipline, reason. The wild horse, it wants pleasure, beauty, temptation. And the man, you're the driver. It's your job to control the horses. But what happens when a beautiful woman walks into your life? That wild horse rears up. It kicks, it screams, it wants. Her laugh, her scent, her touch. And most men? They let the wild horse take the reins. No resistance, no discipline, just chaos disguised as romance. You call it falling in love. Plato called it spiritual slavery. In Symposium, Plato didn't say love was happiness. He said love is madness. Divine madness, yes, but madness all the same. A fire sent by the gods to test your soul. And if you haven't trained yourself, if you haven't built a fortress in your mind, you're gonna burn in it. And women, consciously or unconsciously, know this. They know how easily men are ruled by that madness. They can feel it, and they don't have to do anything evil or strategic. All they need to do is exist in your mind as the reward, the purpose, the prize. The moment you make her your goal, your meaning, your reason for being, you're finished. You're no longer seeing her. You're seeing your fantasy of her. That's when manipulation becomes effortless, not because she's trying to fool you, but because you've already fooled yourself. Plato warned that men who don't govern themselves will be governed by others. He said tyrants rise when men surrender self-discipline. And I ask you, what is a greater tyrant in a man's heart than the desire for a woman's approval? She doesn't need to twist your arm. All she needs to do is smile, ignore you, test you, flirt with you, and you fold. You twist yourself into knots. You sacrifice your purpose, your principles, your soul. And the brutal truth? You think you're chasing her, but really, you're running from yourself. The war is not between you and women. The war is within you, between your higher self, the one that craves truth, and the lower self that craves attention, pleasure, and validation. And every time you choose the lower path, she doesn't even have to beat you. You beat yourself. Plato said a just man never lets his appetites rule him. But here you are, bargaining with your emotions, hoping she chooses you, hoping you're enough. That is not love. That's desperation with a mask on. You've escaped one cave just to build another. You've traded iron chains for gold ones, but they're chains all the same. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you seriously asked yourself why you chase women? Not just for sex, not just for company, but why you build your life around being chosen by someone who may not even understand you. Most men don't ask that, because asking demands courage, and courage means you have to look in the mirror and admit you've been living a lie. That your entire love story has been a cover-up for something deeper, your fear of facing yourself. And until you do that, until you look at the illusion and the light, you'll keep living as a slave, not to women, but to the fantasy of women that you refuse to question. Plato understood something that still shakes the foundation of society today. Civilization is built on stories, on myths designed to keep people in line. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the story men have been fed about women. You've been told she's your other half, that she completes you, that she holds the keys to your happiness. It sounds beautiful, right? But Plato would have told you, this is a dangerous illusion, a comforting lie, one that keeps you chasing shadows instead of truth. In the Republic, Plato laid it bare. The masses must be ruled by those who've seen the truth. But what's the real tragedy? Most men never become rulers of their own minds. They're too distracted, too emotional, too reactive. And when it comes to women, they live entirely in the lower realm of their nature, the appetite. Plato split the soul into three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. Reason seeks truth and wisdom. Spirit seeks courage and honor. Appetite? Appetite wants pleasure, comfort, easy validation. And that's where most men stay when they deal with women. She smiles. You feel pleasure. She compliments you. You feel alive. She sleeps with you. You feel worthy. But that's not love. That's addiction. And addiction is weakness. That's why women have such incredible power over undisciplined men. Not because they're smarter, not because they're evil, but because they don't need to appeal to your mind to control you. They just need to touch the lowest part of your soul, the appetite. And once they do, you're hooked. They don't even need to lie to you. You lie to yourself. You tell yourself she respects you. You tell yourself she's the one. You tell yourself this is what love is supposed to feel like. But it's not. It's you, starving for emotional validation and thinking her attention is food. You could have been your own source of strength. You could have built something unbreakable within yourself. But instead, you crawled, begged, chased, hoping for her approval like it was oxygen. Look around the world. Men cheat on their wives because a stranger gave them attention. Men walk away from their children for a few nights of pleasure. Men destroy their careers, their reputations, their legacies because she smiled. What more proof do you need that men are ruled by the weakest part of their nature? Plato's warning wasn't subtle. He said, "No man is free who isn't the master of himself." Let that sink in. If your desire for attention can be used against you, you are not free. If your craving for validation can be turned into a weapon, you are not free. If a single glance can break you, you are not free. And it doesn't matter how much money you make, how many followers you have, how many women you attract. If you crumble the moment one woman pulls back her affection, you're still a prisoner. Now zoom out with me. In the Laws, Plato explained that the fall of a city begins when men place pleasure above discipline. That's how civilizations collapse. That's how empires crumble, not from war, but from weakness. When men no longer seek truth, when they chase comfort, when they stop standing for anything real. And what is our world today if not a giant monument to that collapse? You see it in politics, men apologizing for being men. You see it in culture, men silencing themselves so they don't upset her. You see it in religion, men twisting scripture just to win her approval. It's everywhere, and Plato wasn't surprised. He saw it coming 2,000 years ago. Because the moment a man trades discipline for desire, his soul begins to rot. Now hear me clearly, Plato never said to hate women. That's not the point. The woman is not the problem. She is not your enemy. She is your mirror. She reflects what you failed to master within yourself. You see, she plays the game because you invited her to the table unprepared. She only wins because you walked in blind, untrained, and desperate. But that doesn't mean you have to stay that way. You can flip the board. You can stop playing her game and start mastering your own. But it takes something rare, the courage to face yourself. Here's a truth nobody wants to say out loud. Women test men. They don't even need to do it intentionally. Sometimes it's subconscious, but they test for one reason, to expose the weakness already in you. She pushes your limits to see if you'll enforce boundaries. She withholds affection to see if you'll beg. She challenges your principles to see if you'll fold just to keep her happy. And every time you break, every time you bend, every time you sell yourself out for another taste of her validation, she loses respect for you. Because deep down, she knows that a man who cannot rule himself cannot rule anything. Not his mind, not his home, not his destiny. Plato called the ideal ruler a philosopher king. Not a tyrant, not a simp, not a doormat, a philosopher, a man who has trained his soul, a man who seeks wisdom over pleasure, a man who leads himself before leading others. And you? You have the same choice. If you can look into a woman's eyes, not to chase her, not to impress her, not to conquer her, but to see clearly, if you can recognize her not as a goddess, not as a seductress, not as a curse, but as a mirror, you win. Because then, and only then, you step into the role Plato described, the just man, the man who rules himself. And that man cannot be manipulated. He cannot be broken. He cannot be played. You want to stop being the puppet? Cut the strings. Stop chasing her shadow. Stop worshiping the illusion. Stop thinking her love will fix the emptiness inside you. Stand up, face the truth, and start mastering the one player you can actually control, the one inside you. Here's the harsh truth most men run from. You don't fear losing her. You fear facing what her absence would force you to see, your own emptiness. Plato warned us centuries ago, the soul takes on the character of the actions it pursues. If you spend your life chasing validation, don't be surprised when your soul becomes weak. If you make a woman's approval your highest pursuit, your soul will shrink. It will become small, reactive, insecure, unworthy of greatness. Every time you compromise your values just to keep her, every time you silence your truth so you don't lose her, every time you walk away from your mission to prioritize her emotions, you are not loving her. You are betraying yourself. And Plato made it clear. Betrayal of the self is the root of all injustice. Ask yourself, why do tyrants rise? Why do empires collapse? Because men refuse to govern themselves. Because men would rather serve pleasure than stand for truth. Because men would rather chase illusions than face the light of reality. And here's what women instinctively understand. They know a man's greatest weakness is his hunger to be chosen. That's why she tests you. Not to hurt you, not even always on purpose. She tests you to see if your identity rests on her approval. She pushes your boundaries to see if you'll enforce them. She withholds affection to see if you'll crumble. She challenges your values to see if you'll betray yourself just to keep her happy. And every time you fold, she might smile on the outside. She might say she still loves you. But deep down, she loses respect for you because she sees it. You're not leading. You're not grounded. You're not ready for the weight of real power. She knows. A man who cannot rule himself cannot rule anything. Now look around. How many men do you see falling into this trap? They think they're being romantic. They think they're fighting for love. They think they're proving themselves as real men. But what they're really doing is betraying their own souls, trading their principles for pleasure, swapping discipline for dopamine. Plato described the ideal man as a philosopher king, someone who has trained himself in reason, aligned himself with truth, and refused to be swayed by the noise of the masses. And in today's world, that kind of man is almost extinct. Why? Because men are constantly told that devotion means self-sacrifice, that love means surrender, that proving your worth means giving up everything for her approval. But Plato warned us about this kind of manipulation in the Republic. He described it as the rule of the many by the persuasive flatterers. And who flatters you more than a woman who knows exactly what to say to keep you emotionally hooked? She doesn't have to argue with your mind. She doesn't need to win a debate. She just needs to make you feel special, and your mind will betray itself. And that's the real tragedy. You destroy yourself for her attention, thinking you're chasing love when really you're just chasing emotional slavery. And it doesn't stop with individuals. Plato wasn't only talking about men, he was talking about civilizations. He watched Athens collapse because its men lost discipline, because leaders started bending truth to please the crowd, because passion and pleasure began to outweigh principle. Just like modern men are now compromising their values to gain favor with women who don't even respect them. It's the same pattern, same disease, same collapse, but Plato didn't just diagnose the illness. He offered the cure. He taught that the highest aim of a man is to pursue the good, to climb out of the cave, to stand in the light, even when it hurts, even when it blinds you, even when it forces you to abandon everything you once believed. And that's what most men will never do. They will never dare to see the woman clearly, not as an angel, not as a devil, but as a mirror. A mirror reflecting their own undisciplined appetites, their fragile egos, their desperate need to be seen, wanted, validated. So I ask you now, with no filter, no soft edges, do you have the courage to face that reflection? Can you stand tall, not as a beggar hoping to be loved, not as a slave addicted to attention, but as a man who governs himself first? Because until you do, you will always be vulnerable to manipulation. You will always fall for the game. You will always be played. But when you finally stand in the light, Plato described, when you rule your inner world, when you look at her not with lust, not with desperation, but with clarity, you'll see it. She's not your goddess. She's not your salvation. She's not your enemy. She's your test. And if you pass it, not by domination, not by hatred, but by mastery, you become the man Plato's envisioned, the just man, the king of his mind, the ruler of himself. And that kind of man, he cannot be broken. He cannot be seduced by illusion. He cannot be shaken by games. So here's my challenge to you. Stop chasing the shadow. Stop trying to earn what you should be embodying. Stop giving your soul away for a moment of affection. Stand up, look in the mirror, face the parts of yourself you've avoided for far too long. The insecurity, the obsession, the emotional dependency. Own it, master it, transcend it. Because once you do, you'll never again fear the games women play. Not because you've won, but because you've outgrown the need to play at all. And if this message struck a nerve, if it lit a fire in your soul, don't let it stop here. Like the video. Share it with a brother who needs to hear this. Subscribe. We are building something rare, something real. A brotherhood of men who refuse to live in shadows. Men who are done being ruled by desire. Men who train their minds, sharpen their spirits, and walk in truth. Follow the link in the description. Join us. Step out of the cave. Rule yourself. And become the kind of man Plato believed could lead the world.